Ken Curtis met a tragic end shortly after suffering a heart attack caused by the words of his wife. Dan Blocker left this world far too soon. His sudden passing shocking a nation that had welcomed him into their living rooms every Sunday night. Born Bobby Dan Davis. Blocker on December 10, 1928, in DeKalb, Texas. He arrived in this world as a force of nature, literally weighing 14 pounds at birth, foreshadowing the larger-than-life presence he would become. Growing up in the dusty cotton fields of West Texas during the Great Depression's lingering years, young Dan learned about hardship, community, and the value of honest labor. His father worked the land, and his mother taught school, instilling in him a deep respect for education and hard work that would guide him throughout his life. Despite his imposing size, he would eventually stand 6 feet 4 inches tall and weigh over 300 pounds. Dan was known as a gentle soul even in childhood. Neighbors remembered him helping elderly folks carry groceries, protecting smaller kids from bullies, and always having a kind word for everyone he met. This contradiction between his intimidating physical presence and his tender heart would become the foundation of his most memorable work. The young Texan excelled in school, driven by his mother's insistence that education was the pathway to a better life. He wasn't content with just getting by. Dan pushed himself academically and athletically, playing football despite coaches initially worrying his size might be a disadvantage. After graduating high school, Blocker attended Texas Military Institute before transferring to Sul-Ross State Teachers College, where he earned a degree in speech and drama. His passion for performance was ignited during college theater productions, where directors quickly realized that beneath his mountain-of-a-man exterior lived an actor of surprising sensitivity and range. He could make audiences laugh with a raised eyebrow, or move them to tears with a subtle change in his voice. Following graduation, Dan served in the United States Army during the Korean War, an experience that deepened his understanding of duty, sacrifice, and the bonds between men under pressure, themes that would resonate throughout his acting career. After his military service, Blocker pursued a master's degree in dramatic arts, an unusual path for someone who could have easily relied on his physical presence alone. This commitment to craft separated him from many actors of his era. He taught high school English and drama for several years, genuinely loving the work of shaping young minds. Students remembered him as demanding but fair, someone who believed in them even when they didn't believe in themselves. However, the call of the stage and screen grew stronger, and in the mid-1950s, he made the bold decision to move his young family to California to pursue acting professionally. Hollywood in the late 1950s was a challenging place for character actors, and Blocker faced his share of rejection. Casting directors often saw only his size, offering him roles as thugs, brutes, and villains. But Dan refused to be typecast solely as a menacing figure. He took small parts in television westerns and crime dramas, gradually building a reputation as a reliable professional actor who brought depth to every role, no matter how small. He appeared in shows like The Restless Gun, Gunsmoke, and The Rifleman, always leaving an impression. Directors noted his professionalism, his willingness to take direction, and his ability to find the humanity in any character. Then came 1959, and with it, the role that would define his career and cement his place in television history. David Dortort, creator of Bonanza, was casting for a new Western series centered around a Nevada ranch family. He needed someone to play Eric Haas Cartwright, the middle son, a character who would need to be both physically imposing and emotionally accessible. When Dan Blocker walked into the audition, Dortort immediately knew he had found his Haas. What could have been a one-dimensional big guy role transformed under Blocker's skilled hands into one of television's most beloved characters. Haas Cartwright became America's favorite gentle giant. Week after week, viewers watched as this mountain of a man demonstrated that true strength lay not in violence but in compassion, loyalty, and moral courage. Blocker infused Haas with a childlike wonder at the world, a deep love for his family, and an unwavering sense of right and wrong. When Haas laughed, America laughed with him. When he cried, which he did unashamedly, grown men across the country found themselves wiping away tears. The character resonated because Dan Blocker poured his own values into every performance: kindness, integrity, and the belief that every person deserved dignity and respect. Bonanza became a phenomenon, dominating Sunday night television for over a decade. At its peak, it was the most watched show in America, and Hoss Cartwright was consistently ranked as viewers' favorite character. Fan mail poured into the studio by the thousands, with letters from children, parents, and grandparents all expressing their love for the gentle cowboy. Blocker took this responsibility seriously, understanding that he had become a role model for millions. He made public appearances at hospitals, schools, and charity events, never turning down an opportunity to bring joy to others, especially children. Behind the scenes, Dan Blocker was respected and admired by his colleagues. Lorne Greene, Michael Landon, and Pernell Roberts all spoke of his generosity, his humor, and his dedication to making Bonanza the best show possible. He was known for standing up for the crew members, ensuring they received proper credit and fair treatment. When he felt scripts didn't do justice to his character or the show's values, he wasn't afraid to speak up, always advocating for quality and authenticity. His dressing room was known as a gathering place where cast and crew would come to share stories, seek advice, or simply enjoy his company. Dan Blocker's personal life reflected the same values he portrayed on screen. He married Dolphia Parker in 1952, his college sweetheart, and their marriage was, by all accounts, a partnership built on deep love and mutual respect. Dolphia provided stability and support as Dan navigated the unpredictable waters of show business. Together, they raised 4 children, and Blocker was fiercely devoted to his family. Despite the demands of filming, he prioritized time with his wife and kids, coaching Little League, attending school plays, and making sure his children understood they were more important than any television show. Friends often remarked that Dan was the same person at home as he was on screen: warm, funny, protective, and present. However, the physical demands of playing Hoss Cartwright were considerable. The long days on the Ponderosa set, often filming in extreme heat while wearing heavy period costumes, took their toll. Blocker's weight, while perfect for the character, created health challenges that he tried to manage privately. He didn't want to worry his family or disappoint his fans. In early 1972, he began experiencing troubling symptoms: fatigue, shortness of breath, and discomfort that he initially dismissed as the normal aches of a man in his 40s who worked long hours. Those close to him noticed he seemed more tired than usual, but Dan characteristically downplayed his concerns, joking that he just needed a vacation. In May 1972, the symptoms worsened. Dan was scheduled for what doctors assured him would be routine gallbladder surgery. It seemed like a straightforward procedure, nothing to worry about excessively. He checked into the hospital with his typical good humor, joking with nurses and staff, never imagining he wouldn't return to the Ponderosa. The surgery itself went as planned, but in the hours that followed, complications arose. A blood clot formed, traveling to his lungs, a pulmonary embolism that his already stressed cardiovascular system couldn't overcome. On May 13, 1972, Dan Blocker died suddenly at the age of 43. The news sent shockwaves through Hollywood and across America. It seemed impossible that someone so vital, so full of life, could be gone so suddenly. The Bonanza cast and crew were devastated, and Lorne Greene reportedly wept openly upon hearing the news. Production shut down as everyone struggled to process the loss of their friend and colleague. Michael Landon said it felt like losing a brother, and the void Dan left behind could never be filled. For the millions of fans who had invited Hoss Cartwright into their homes every Sunday night, the grief was profound and personal. Letters poured into the network and the Blocker family by the tens of thousands, each expressing heartbreak and sharing stories of how Dan's portrayal of kindness and strength had impacted their lives. Parents wrote about how their children had learned lessons about compassion from Hoss. Veterans shared that watching Bonanza had helped them readjust to civilian life. Teachers explained how they used clips of the show to discuss moral courage with their students. The 14th season of Bonanza premiered without Dan Blocker, and it was never the same. The producers tried to continue, but the chemistry that had made the show special was irreparably broken. The series ended after one more season, unable to overcome the absence of its heart. To this day, fans and television historians agree that Bonanza died when Dan Blocker did, even though it took another year for the final episode to air. Dan Blocker was laid to rest in Woodman Cemetery in DeKalb, Texas, returning to the soil of his birth. Thousands attended the funeral, lining the streets to pay their respects to a man who had given them so much joy. The grave marker is simple and unpretentious, much like the man himself, bearing only his name and dates. No grand statements or epithets needed for someone whose life spoke volumes. In the decades since his passing, Dan Blocker's legacy has only grown. New generations discover Bonanza through reruns and streaming services, and they invariably fall in love with Hoss Cartwright. The character remains a touchstone for depicting masculinity that embraces both strength and tenderness, proving that a real man can be gentle, can cry, can choose peace over violence. In an era where toxic masculinity is finally being questioned and challenged, Dan Blocker's portrayal of Hoss Cartwright offers a roadmap for a better way. Those who knew Dan personally still speak of him with reverence and love. They remember his booming laugh, his fierce loyalty, his genuine interest in others, and his complete lack of pretension despite his fame. He never forgot where he came from or let success change his fundamental decency. In a business known for ego and artifice, Dan Blocker remained refreshingly authentic. The tragedy of Dan Blocker's death lies not just in its suddenness, but in all the work left undone, the performances never given, the lives he might have continued to touch. At 43, he still had so much to offer, both as an artist and as a human being. Yet, perhaps there's also something fitting about him leaving at the height of his powers, forever young in our memories, forever riding across the Ponderosa with that gentle smile and generous heart. His story reminds us that heroes don't always carry guns or win fights. Sometimes the greatest hero is the one who chooses kindness when cruelty would be easier, who stands up for the powerless, who leads with his heart. Dan Blocker lived that truth every day, both on screen and off, and in doing so, he left this world a better place than he found it. That's the real measure of a life well lived.